What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, joined once again by my guy Morgan Cannon, and this is your go-to place for all things Lions related. That includes news, updates, analysis, and so much more. Today, we are going to be continuing our All-22 film breakdown session of the 2025 draft class. Today, we will be focusing on 7th round draft pick, I believe he was, Dan Jackson, safety out of Georgia. Morgan, I'm not going to lie, this was actually a little more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. I'm not going to lie, like once you start getting into like 6th and 7th round draft picks, it's very rare that the tape that you're going to see is littered with a ton of good things. There's typically more things to nitpick. But I think Dan Jackson actually, in his lone season as a starter at Georgia, actually put some good things on tape and at least can see at least glimpses of some things of what the Lions probably saw in his tape to make him be someone that they actually wanted to draft.
Yeah, and we know the Lions value special teams and special teams play, so I get why they had their eye on Dan Jackson in the late round. And yeah, he was a 7th round. I can't remember off the top where, but 6'1", 190, was originally a walk-on and has that's pretty cool going from walk-on to starting at the University of Georgia for Kirby Smart's defense. So yeah, to your point, it was fun. It's always fun for me watching Georgia's defense. That's a well-coached unit that runs to the football. So, but yeah, there's some good things. There's some things where you're like, yeah, I understand why he was a day 3 pick, but there's some tools to develop. And right away, he has traits that, in my opinion, you'll see it when you guys watch some of these clips that should translate pretty well to special teams, right, Miko? Sometimes just playing with your hair on fire and getting downhill.
Yeah, I think those are things that, like you said, we're going to be able to point out things like that. I think he's definitely very heady, and I think there's something we'll be able to point out as well on the tape. And like you can definitely see he understands what's happening on the field. But to your point, Morgan, there are some things that show up as well where, okay, maybe he knows what to do, but necessarily his body isn't quite accustomed to doing those things, or he sometimes just get caught out of position in certain situations. So it's going to be a really interesting one. We have games from Alabama and his game against Texas. So this should definitely be a really good one to definitely see like how he stacks up against two really, power programs in the college game.
Yeah, and the two, they both have aspects of, being a pro style offense. So they're going to test you in a myriad of different ways. You're going to have to defend all 100 yards. So yeah, it's always interesting to watch these kind of teams play. In my opinion, these are the college football games I watch just because it's good stuff. So off the bat, good angle and good closing speed on the screen to the wide side of the field. So this is something Bama did quite a bit with Jalen Milroe at quarterback. So yeah. And he closes with violence. You see that a lot too. He wants to put the thump on you. So I'm not mad at him for that, right, Miko?
No, and these are things that I'm very big on, like secondary play, especially safety play. And so when you're able to play this far away from the ball and be able to recognize plays and then be able to like make quick decisions to break on the football, you love to see that from a secondary, whether it's a corner or a safety. And so this definitely got me nodding my head like, okay, we definitely have some good recognition skills, some ability to read and react. Again, and I think that translates both to playing safety as well as, again, if we're talking about special teams, I think it translates in that regard as well.
Yeah, and there's at times he'll break down and make the stop there knowing he's close to the boundary. But then there's other times we'll get to where he, tries to thump him a little bit too much and doesn't wrap up. So, and a lot of defenders are guilty of that. Everyone wants to put the big hit on people. I know I did. So it happens, but yeah, good example right out of the gate. And yeah, he is heady. You can see that he watches tape and he's processing what's happening in front of him pretty quickly. And I'm sure that's what helped get him on the field for one of the best defenses in the country. So this next one's one of my favorites. He IDs his assignment right away. And again, closes with some nastiness, some juice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, these are things that you'd love to see out of a safety. It definitely looks like they were at least manned up. So again, to be able to sift through traffic, be able to keep his eyes on his man, know where he's supposed to be, and again meets the ball carrier with really violent intentions, is able to get him to the ground, no yak. Again, this is a really positive mark in the book of Dan Jackson, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's on 3rd down too. I don't know that I can't remember off the top if they went for it or not, but in theory, it should get them off the field. And this is the stuff you like to see when teams run these little crossers and these little, just designed to get traffic and get people bumping into each other, get somebody free. This is good safety play, like you said, because he went from the shortest point, took a beeline straight to the football, and closes with a good legal hit. So Yeah, that's an A+ in my book too. Jumping next, man, we got, so it looks like cover three. So he's responsible for that deep middle third. Does a good job of reading the quarterback's eyes and squeezes towards the boundary as he scrambles in that same direction. So this is just understanding where you're at on the football field and, being able to make it, to make it more difficult. And unfortunately, Milroe's an incredible athlete and still makes a really good play here. But overall, good rep from Jackson. And because I think they wanted to go like straight up the seam there, in my opinion. That was probably Milroe's first read, right, Miko?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think this is one of those things with Dan Jackson. Like there's some versatility there in terms of scheme diversity. Like, again, being able to play single high, he's definitely lined up as split safety as well. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's great at either, but he does, at least, you can at least put him out there and he seems to understand what his assignment is. Like you were pointing out, Morgan, being able to take away that middle of the field so that he can kind of play both sides. As Bama sent both, like I think both slot receivers are running pretty much go routes. He does cheat a little bit too far to one side. I would like to see him stay a little bit more in the middle of the field so that he can play both sides of the field. But again, this is something that I think he can do. He just doesn't always do it at probably the highest level when you talk about wanting him
like a beat or two late getting to where he needs to get to. All right, jump into the next one, man. This is one of my favorite reps of his. So very little wasted movement downhill, closes the distance in the alley with violence. What we talk about with the alley, so it's the space between the trenches and where the cornerback is out there holding his edge against the receiver. So, you got to get downhill. That's where some of the biggest collisions in football can happen, to be honest with you. But he does a good job of this, in my opinion. He doesn't waste time. He's not afraid to throw his weight around. And it's something that should translate well to being a special teamer, right, Miko?
Yeah, absolutely. This screams Dan Campbell type of play to me.
Yeah.
Because again, are you willing to go in there and make the dirty play, right? Like, and when I mean dirty play is that, like you said, like this is a tough part of the football field to be able to, squeeze in between where the lineman is and where the corner is, and you got to go in there and make a tackle when it's just you and the running back. And Dan Jackson at least shows that he has that type of toughness. He has that type of mentality. And again, I just love the fact that he understands what is happening in front of him. Like you said, little wasted movement and attacks the play as it's developing. And so, yeah, I could see this again, whether it's on defense or just in special teams, this really translating very well for him at the next level.
Yeah, and this is on fourth down too. I just realized I love that. I just looked down at the boundary there and I see that number 4. So that's a huge play to get down there with your hair on fire and get him on the ground. So a good play from Dan Jackson, one of my favorite reps. Yeah, and then next one, it's against Texas. And this is a good example, like we've talked about. He's IDing his assignment. So they're going to send a motion to the top of the screen and a little bit of a switch release. And they're running a stop with that receiver that ends up in Jackson's area, but he does a good job of driving on him, taking that option away from Quinn Ewers, the quarterback. And I'm pretty sure it looked like he wanted to go there, but Jackson was right on him, right, Miko?
Yeah, these are things that, again, as a safety, it's not about always being able to cover the deeper part of the field. Sometimes as plays are developing in front of you, you have to be able to, again, be able to read and react to those things as well. So again, being able to keep your eyes in front, have your assignment, and as someone kind of comes into your zone, to be able to take that away, and also be able to trust the guys behind you, because he did have cover, like he did have support on that deeper half of the field. So again, you don't have to worry about continuing to go backwards because you're supposed to have guys back there that are supposed to, cover that portion of the field. So I like, again, these are very likable traits for Dan Jackson when it comes down to him being coachable. And I think if you give him a very set of tasks and responsibilities as a safety, he can execute those. I think also, again, we continue to talk about him as a special teamer. I think if you give him an assignment when it comes down to whether it's kick return, punt return, you can at least trust that he'll be able to execute those and know where he's supposed to be on the field.
Yeah, and it looks like they're in cover 3 here. So this is something I can see him being comfortable with pretty quickly as a pro, being that robber, because that's what it looks like he is here, taking away the middle of the field in this particular instance. So I'm fine with that. I think playing downhill and then moving forward, like we talked about before we jumped on, he looks comfortable there, and being able to read and react quickly, I think that's going to be a strong point of his game as he develops as a pro.
Absolutely. I think if they can continue, if again they need him to go out there and play, a safety role, I think you can at least trust that he'll be able to do that well. And I think the next play that we're going to get into also is a pretty good example of that as well, as far as him again understanding, just his role and his assignment.
Yeah, I completely agree, Miko, because honestly, this is right place, right time. This is why coaches consistently preach about playing within the confines of the defense, and good things will happen to you. Here, Bama's down in the red zone, and Georgia's in a too high look with man on the outside. He initially travels with the post, but at the last second, his eyes are in the right spot. The tight end, you'll see it's a little bit of a delayed release right up the seam. Someone gets a good hit on him. Interception, big takeaway for Georgia, and really
his role, understands his responsibilities, and will find himself in good position more often than not.
No doubt, man. I think football is one of those games where it pays to be lucky, and that you're lucky. If you're lucky a lot, it's probably because you're in the right place at the right time. So plays like this, someone getting popped and then the ball's in your hands. Jump into our next one. Looks like Georgia's in cover 2 with the other safety driving on the post near the hash. You'll see here Jackson just needs to be deeper earlier is what it looks like, and not a great throw here, to be honest. And if he were deeper earlier, he probably could have made a play on this ball, because this isn't a super throw, right, Miko?
Yeah, these are some of the red flags that kind of pop up in Dan Jackson's tape. It's like, as good as he is at going
to make that an easier completion for Milroe. So yeah, not going to kill him for it, but something that can definitely be improved upon, and I'm sure it will. With the Lions coaching staff, something that they're certainly going to put a focus on for Jackson.
Absolutely. I think it's something that, again, as someone who used to play safety in high school, I know at times like we were told to like watch the offensive line to be able to tell if it's run or pass. But like I said, this is fairly simple. Like, it's not like a fake, it's not like a draw or anything like that. So like there's not a lot of leeway in terms of like, again, why is Dan Jackson not just trying to get deep and cover that half of the field? Also, even when he does start to kind of like try to trot back, not the greatest show of athleticism, which is crazy because we saw earlier in tape, like, he breaks on the football really well. You would like to see that same type of like sense of urgency when it comes down to covering, again, deeper parts of the field.
Yeah, and at a certain point as a DB, I never played DB at a high level, but you got to just put your head down and go, man, because you got to get to a spot. You got to have some of that catch up speed. And last but not least, we have one more from the Texas game. So you'll see the back release out of the backfield here, and another example. I don't know if Jackson was really anticipating the receiver to settle down or break to the outside, but either way, kind of puts himself in a precarious position here by overrunning. You'll see 0. So boom, overruns it. And if this is a better throw, maybe towards the goal line in that little, by the pylon, maybe this could be 6, but it's kind of a misfire from Ewers. And thankfully for Jackson, because that was I'm not sure. I don't know what his responsibility is. I'm not in the huddle, but kind of looks weird on tape, right, Miko, to drive something like this and then put yourself that much out of position.
Yeah. I mean, you and I went back and forth on whether or not like he's once again in another type of like robber type of situation here in terms of coverage. But again, you want to be able to read and recognize this a lot sooner so that by the time 0 gets on you, he's not able to just blow by you this easily, right? Like, you want to be able to have a little bit more, your feet still kind of going in a way so that you can plant and turn, right? Again, he may still get the better of you in this route, but you're not trying to have this much separation where, again, like, oops, didn't mean to jump ahead that far, but like where by the time he comes out of this break, like, you're this far out of place, right? Like, because you don't have help here, right? And so those are the types of things. Again, there are routes that are meant to beat these types of coverages, but at the same time, you also have to understand technique. You also have to understand responsibility. You also have to be able to read and recognize what's happening when routes are developing so that you don't put yourself and your defense in these types of, bad situations.
Yeah, and this could have been something that Texas set up on tape where Georgia thought getting this look, like pre-snap, this alignment, this personnel, they were going to run something. So it could be something like that too, because if you're a safety or a linebacker, often you're playing chess with the offense. What are they doing here? Just trying to have a little bit more of an advantage pre-snap if you do know if it's a tell. So who knows from Jackson there, but thought we would include it just because it was another example of him maybe not being completely comfortable playing on the back end, just as a safety and like having to play man coverage. I don't know. He could have been a robber there where it was like it could have been some sort of match zone, or he could have been in man. So at either way, at any rate, something that can definitely be cleaned up. And I guess the thing to take out of this is just I think he's going to be a contributor on special teams right away, in my opinion. Just from watching him
Mm-hmm.
play there, like could push for on the punt coverage, kick coverage, a myriad of things because you need those kind of players on those units, right, Miko?
Well, yeah, and it's not just putting him there just because he's not a great safety. It's also what he did primarily at Georgia before he got his starting gig as the starting safety in his senior season. So has a lot more experience playing special teams, but I think there are some things like if they can develop him, again, there's nothing wrong with him having being possibly like a fourth safety in the rotation where again, that's someone that you're hoping that you're going to see a lot of. He's not going to be your if Fatu Melifonwu replacement or anything like that. But I think there's enough good things that you see in his run support and his ability to diagnose plays that are developed that are happening short in the short and mid-range part of the passing game that I really like. It's the deeper part of the field that you really have to get him to understand, like, hey, how quickly you have to make decisions because it's weird. Like, yes, you're really far away from the football, but you're at the NFL now. Guys will eat up 10 yards, 15 yards very quickly, and you have to be able to dissect those things. So those are the things that I think you can absolutely, work with him on. But like you said, Morgan, in the meantime, if you can get him involved into special teams, easily can contribute there. You'd look at it maybe 2 to 3 years later, maybe he's put in enough work to where you trust him out there as a third or fourth safety, not necessarily again playing, but at least someone that you would be like, okay, hey, look, if something happened to Branch or Kirby, hey, we're going to try Dan Jackson out there and we're not going to be shaking in our boots about him possibly giving up some of the plays that we saw later in this film study.
Yeah, and if you can just make him a little more comfortable, a little more competent playing further away from the line of scrimmage, like you said, he could be a useful player because he could be a box safety right away. He's physical, throws his weight around, could wrap up a little. There's some instances that we didn't show where he just threw his body up in there but didn't necessarily wrap up. So we got to have that because you are a safety. You're the last line of defense. If you're missing a tackle, it could be a house call. So overall though, excited to see he'll be one to watch in camp, and hopefully he can be one of Dave Phipp's guys right away because then that's a hit as a draft pick, as a 7th round pick, folks.
Yes.
If he's making noise as a special teamer from the jump, that's a real good hit and another example of Brad Holmes doing his thing.
Absolutely. So that's pretty much going to do it for this film study, guys. We have one more draft prospect that we have to look at. I believe that's Dominic Lovett, the other Georgia player, wide receiver. So we get one more really good film session that we're going to break down and really see how he can contribute to the Lions roster as well. Again, another 7th round pick, but I think there could possibly be some space for him to possibly make something happen in terms of obviously making an impression early in training camp and in preseason and things like that. But as far as Dan Jackson goes, this was a really good film study. If you guys want to catch up on any more additional Lions content, you can always check out prideofdetroit.com. We have new articles and things like that being uploaded over there all the time. If you want to stay locked into the video content that we're doing over here on YouTube, easily you can do that by just subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell. We also have all of the other film studies that we've done of all the other draft prospects that the Lions have made, or draft picks that the Lions have made this year, from Tyleik Williams, Tate Ratledge, and the list goes on and on. So definitely make sure to check those out on the channel as well. With all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.